All right. Are you a grinder? Are you getting lost in the sauce? You're grinding so much you don't know where you are. The process is all over the place. Let's kind of try to dial things in. This is what this video is going to be about. It's going to be about how to feel like a champion and how to act like a champion and how to make sure that we're actually focused in the right ways around our process. So when it comes to getting good at pretty much anything, the process is a necessity. And it can even go so far as to exclude you even needing the vision to being the best at something. If you're just someone that's obsessed with the process in a way that makes sense for your improvement, then you are going to get very, very good. And you are going to get to that level. And at that point, it's going to become just a personal decision as to whether or not you're wanting to engage in playing tournaments and trying to actually compete at that level and join a pro team, like whatever it might be. So, and I got to say, I have actually encountered many players like this over the years, and it shocks me to this day. It just always shocks and surprises me because I'll come into contact with these players and maybe even play on teams with them. I'm like, wow, you're so talented, like you're so good, and wait, you're going to just pick up and leave now that you've gotten to this like super high level, like this like pro level, and they're like, yeah, I'm just going to do something else now. And I mean, it can make sense, I think, from the perspective that perhaps these individuals, this is my theory at least, they are there because they obviously enjoy just just experiencing the discipline, just playing the game, whatever it is. But they are all about improvement process. That's what they're like really kind of grabs them, and they min max it, they optimize it, and they get really good at making a process that works for them, because the process is really a reflection of two things. It's a reflection of what does it take just de facto for human beings to get good at the thing that they're doing, because we all share similar things, like we've all got human bits and bobs, so we've got to consider that. Okay, how do we learn? Okay, well, we've got to put time in, we've got to get good sleep, how do we have better energy levels or mood? Okay, we've got to exercise. There's these constants of being human, right? But then the rest of the process is a reflection of how good you are at looking at the problems and then sort of saying, okay, I'm going to put a solution in to try to solve that problem. So my aim isn't good enough, or my decision making isn't good enough, or my mental game isn't good enough, or I misplay these situations, or I don't know what the answer is in this particular case to this problem, or that maybe you need to read some books because you're led down a path and you're like, I'm not really sure what the best way is to approach training. Maybe I'm going to like read some books about, how they do it in traditional sports. There's all sorts of ways that you can begin to have your process reflect you as a player and the needs that you have to grow. But that type of person that is obsessed with it and really just understands how to have high quality inputs to get the high quality output, and then also at the same time they get a good sense of how to do those optimizations and how to keep honest to it and how to update it and just like have that self-sufficiency behind it. Those are the dudes that like do super well and get to that high level pretty quickly. So and I would say that I think young players, definitely there's a lot. I think with all the extra neuroplasticity that exists in the brain and the ability for like higher energy levels and longer periods of focus, these types of things, and obviously also I think there's other elements to that. When you're young, you have less things to worry about, all sorts of stuff. I think there are some advantages conferred there to you just because of the physiological aspect of being younger, but at the same time there is ample evidence that doesn't matter a huge degree, and that you can still make massive gains as you're getting older. And I think in this context of esports, what does getting older even mean? I think in this context that I'm talking about like the later starters, your early 20s, because that's kind of like I think older in terms of esports, because it seems like in esports, and this is my experience too, like I got to the pro level when I was like 16. I got that's when I was at the top level already. And even before that, when I was 15, I was playing at that level. Maybe not at the top of the top, but I was like very good. And I think that's the kind of thing is like, between that kind of like age period of 14, 15, all the way to like 18, 19, that's kind of, I think, where most people would expect if you've been playing through those years, that if you're going to make it, you would have made it already. But regardless of any of that stuff, the process is really the most important thing. And dialing it back into the whole idea of feeling like a champion, this is another topic or kind of theme of this video, is that yeah, the process is important, but in one part, it's important because it is a reflection of a sort of championship level behavior. If you're really good at looking after your process and being self sufficient, this is how a champion acts. So even if you haven't lifted a trophy, you can start to understand what it feels like to be a champion, because someone that is a professional, because that's what they have to do, that's what they must do. They must take care over all of their game, essentially, and they have to take, again, that self-sufficient approach. Again, you don't have to, in a sense, but I think if you want to increase your chances, this is what you should be doing, and this is what I think most people do without even realizing it, who do achieve this level of success. And so you need to take that pretty seriously yourself, and it gives you this other thing to reinforce this faith that you also must have in yourself, because you must also carry at the same time, concurrently, this faith inside of yourself that you have the capacity, maybe belief is a better word, I mean, it's kind of the same thing in this context, that you have the belief innately that you are able to be a championship player, like you're able to win to pick up a trophy and on stage and do all of that jazz, be a professional player, you're capable of that. You need to understand that has to be a feeling that you have, and that the only thing that makes a difference there as to whether or not you achieve it is your own actions, in the sense that you have the ability to look after your process. And so long as you can kind of get good at that over time, like reinventing it where it's necessary, refining it, staying honest to it, all these different things, having that discipline, all these things, as long as you set the right conditions that you have full agency to do as an individual, that you'll get there. So the only reason that you wouldn't get there is if you don't believe all the way. And if and you might not believe all the way, because it might not be a like true full value for you, which is totally fine. You just have to be honest with yourself about these things. And that is really important. I can't really stress this enough, because I have a lot of personal experience with some of these things in my playing career over the years. Like I had a period of time where I recognized that, I was on a pro team, and I was like, okay, I don't actually feel like I can put the level of time in that actually respects the investment this team is putting into me. Because I got to a point where I like hit this moment in my life where I was like, I don't know if I want to keep doing this. And to be honest, looking back, I don't blame myself, because there wasn't much money in what I was doing. It was, and it required so much time. It requires like so much practice time, and so I started playing less, because I'm like, I got to try to figure something else out for my life. And so I approached the team and I said, hey, I don't think it's really fair that like I represent you guys. Like I have this feeling inside me that I'm just not all the way there, on this. So I'm gonna leave, and I didn't have to. I think they wanted me to even stay, but it just didn't feel right. So I ended up leaving, and so that's a perfectly honest and correct reason to leave, and to not have that belief in myself, because my values change, my interests change. But if you are feeling that your interests and your values do align with that end goal, then you've got to then respect that to the fullest extent that you can, and make sure that the efforts that you put in are high quality in your process, and the outputs are therefore high quality as well. And that if anything comes in between that and you need to immediately try to figure out what some kind of a solution looks like. So you can run into varying issues. Like you can run into issues like you're in, this is an external one, you're in an environment where the people that you're playing with, the team that you're playing with, perhaps, you improved a lot this season. You're absolutely the best player, the star player, and the other players around you weren't improving. They're like, it's kind of clear that they're either not as talented as you, or they aren't as putting in as much work as you, or they just don't care as much as you, which all of those things are totally fine. But you might be really good friends. And I've seen lots of really good players stay in these scenarios where what they need to do for their own growth is immediately because by the way, this is one of the most effective ways to get better. It's that point, and I experienced this multiple times when I was coming up as a Quake player when I was young, where you get to like a level, like let's say you get to that Division 3 level, you're playing in Division 3, but then maybe you kind of outgrow it. As soon as you jump up a level and you start playing with like the Division 2 caliber players, whoa, you improve a lot, and then you start playing with the Division 1 players because you kind of like, get through the Division 2 like skill bracket, and you get to the top of that, and then you make the jump again, and it's another big leap, and then suddenly you're playing with these players, and you learn so much stuff. There's a word for this ultimately, which is cross pollination. When you pull together players who are generally a lot better, then there's way more stuff for you to learn from, because you're able to pull and like learn from all these different people, and they're sharing ideas, and they're all kind of sharing their passion, and they're probably they got there because they're as intense as you about everything. So you're actually going to be better pursuing your value by making sure that you make a decision that actually respects how much you want to get better, and that's a goal of yours, and that if you're in an environment that prevents you from doing that, you need to try to find a way out of that environment into one in which you can grow. So similarly, it could be the case that you have issues with your mental game, like you start tilting really badly. Well, if you're tilting really badly, that's going to destroy your quality of input, because you're really emotional. It's everything that you're doing is wrong at that point. Like if you go into the point of tilt, everything is wrong. You cannot allow that to happen, because it's going to degrade your quality of practice immensely. So that is the number one priority for you to solve. It's as similar an existential problem as is the other one, where you're stuck in a bad environment, where you're leaving loads of gains on the table because you're not willing to kind of make the decision to kind of say, see you guys later. I love you guys, but I hope you understand. I need to like go and play with better people. If they're good friends, they will understand. And similarly with the tilt thing, it's it's a situation where a lot of people actually are not super honest with themselves about this one. And tilt can take many different forms, and there can be many different versions of this. There can be versions that are just inclusive of shutdown, or versions that are inclusive of people losing focus. And so, because what happens is maybe they don't like get really angry and tilt in that way, but maybe they instead really withdraw, and the level of energy that's going into the game is reduced. The level of communication is reduced, and generally you're not in a mindset to perform. So that's also a problem too. That's a mental game issue. If you're not able to like jump into the game with full focus, full attention, full energy, all these different things, you're going to be leaving some gains on the table. So we've got to look after these things. So again, like this is kind of a PSA a little bit to kind of call you guys out, and in the most loving way possible, and say, make sure that you're checking that your process is really serving your goals, and it's reflecting what you need as a player, as opposed to anything else. And make sure that in the course of you doing that if you're really struggling with it, that put in that as part of your process, practice it, or find an answer somewhere. This is all about self-sufficiency. This is, by the way, the reason why with the aim training coaches, which I love this about them actually, because they're all about this. They talk about self-sufficiency a lot. They're most, they can do a really great job in coaching you, but they are the most interested in ensuring that you leave their programs as a self-sufficient individual, able to understand how to analyze your own problems and how to come to solutions, and then how to execute on those solutions that would then lead you to making that kind of leap in progress that you're looking for. And it's absolutely the same thing here. Like if you want to get really sick as a player, you've got to become self-sufficient, and you have to be self-sufficient in all the different ways. I'm going to share with you another pitfall that's common. Sometimes what people will do, again, not being honest with themselves, and I'm absolutely calling out people that do this right now, is, and by the way, this is a phenomenon that I have seen with a lot of pro players more than anyone else. So calling it out. Playing more does not solve the problems. In fact, we talked about this with Vanity on the podcast recently. Playing more is not a solution to any problem. That you can just throw at a problem. You can't just throw at a problem. Okay, I'm bad at something specific. I will just play more. I mean, firstly, we understand that the reason why that doesn't work is because if there's a specific problem, by playing a game, you're doing everything, by playing a game. Like what is your plan to specifically solve that problem? Now, playing more can make sense, but not from that logic. And that's often the logic that's used, is like, oh, I'm having some bad performances, I will just play more. I'm having an issue in my game, it's not feeling good, I'll just play even more hours, because there's some association that we have with how hours equals like hard work. And that if let's say I look at a pro player and they're underperforming, and yet they're putting in even more time, that is somehow an acceptable way to deal with that problem. That's not necessarily the case. That's often a cop-out answer because it's not actually doing the hard work, which is the reason why that problem exists probably in the first place, is that player has not got the tools to solve that problem. And if that player then doesn't, try to create those tools to solve that problem, they're probably going to keep experiencing that problem. Unless someone, unless a coach comes in and there's some kind of an intervention that helps them to solve it, because otherwise you are just like, beating your head against the wall. You're just doing the same thing. And the problem is with playing more as well, especially if you're in more of a negative mindset, is that you're probably more likely, as you'll be more tired, to actually make more mistakes and to actually habituate more types of mistakes. The reason why pro players actually do it is because it actually helps them to feel more prepared, and it helps them to feel more confident because they get more kind of reps, and the mechanics actually end up feeling better. So it's actually, you're actually creating a situation where you're making some other things feel better. So it does actually have like some kind of a meaningful benefit, but you're doing it to like indirectly try to solve a different problem. So that's kind of the issue. And another reason why this happens is because the other problem happens, and that hurts the player's confidence. So by playing more and by working on mechanics and all this kind of stuff, it helps them to get, address the symptom of the issue of lacking of the confidence because of the issue, as opposed to, again, maybe figuring out what the actual issue is. So this is kind of all to say that it's very easy to kind of be dishonest with ourselves and trick ourselves when it comes to understanding how to approach these problems. So with all of that said, let's recap a little bit. So to have the ability to be a champion, it's very helpful if you feel like a champion. And one of the things in fact, I have to, instead of, let's do the recap in a second. I have got to drop this anecdote in. So in the past, when Quake 4 came out, I was on a team. This was like, I think, this was like the highest performing team I think I had. We were like top 2 in Europe, and Europe was the Quake 4 scene. Ultimately, it was very, very minimal in the States, and all of the best Quake players were generally in Europe. The pool of talent, it's like Counter-Strike. Think of it like Counter-Strike, I suppose. It's very similar to that. That's kind of how older school FPS esports kind of looks. Is like that kind of like massive skew towards Europe when it comes to FPS esports being like significantly better, loads more players, loads like more higher level players. So in Europe, we were like the top two team. There's only one other team that could really beat us, but we didn't lose against anyone else. And there was just a huge gap. And so during this period of time, 6 to 8 months, I got to experience what it felt like to be so good that you just don't lose. And that even when you're in situations where it feels like in any other situation, like if it would feel like a lost game. But for us, we just all knew that we were so good that even though the game looked really bad, we just knew innately we would win anyway. And I remember this like feeling on the team, and it is definitely a feeling that I've talked to players who like in Counter-Strike or Valorant who have achieved like similar-ish levels of dominance. They describe a similar feeling and it's a reward that you get from just constant winning. So over time, that constant winning kind of allows you to like really have that feeling be even more, that like confidence be even stronger. But with that said, you need to nurture that confidence that you have in you of being able to be like very good and be able to solve any problem anyway, because that's kind of what it is. It's just a high level of confidence. In this particular anecdote that I used, we have all this evidence that would suggest that, hey, I should be able to believe in myself in this way. But the thing is that that's all just, that's just all a psychological thing, essentially. That's just reinforced by these results. You can reinforce other positive psychological things that feel similar by putting in the work. Like if you put in loads of work and you feel prepared and you know how much effort you put in, you can still feel like you are that player before you've even gotten to that level. And this is something that I also noticed in myself when I was a young player trying to get good really quickly. When I entered the scene, re-entered the scene in 2003, oh my God, holy shit, 20 years ago, almost more than that, actually. In fact, more than that, 20 years ago, I very quickly rose up through the ranks. Like within like about a year, I went from like, again, like Division 3 like level to like the top level, like the like the franchise level essentially. So very, very quickly rose up the ranks. And I did so always having this feeling that I knew that I was going to be one of the best players. Like that feeling always existed in me. And I remember that. And I remember that it helped me a lot because it allowed me to kind of keep myself focused on my goals. And I had to do some of the stuff that I talked about. In fact, now that I think about it, both the tilt and the issue with the social cost issue, I had both of those issues that I had to solve. I had to solve the tilt issue. It took me a couple months. When I said you have to like solve this no matter what, it took me a couple months of just focusing on this one thing to solve it. But it was really bad. I remember getting so angry, like I like couldn't function almost. Like I couldn't play anymore. Like I became like a mindless bot, and I was like super angry, like really pissed off. Like I was so angry in the game. Like I'd never experienced that level of frustration or anger with like outside of my life in any other areas, but just that specific, like losing and at the time it was 1v1 that would really set me off. I would just have like a really big issue with it, and I just didn't know how to like solve it. And it took me a while to figure out how to deal with it. But anyway, similarly, I had another issue where I people didn't like me because I was getting better so quickly. They were seeing me make a lot of progress and getting into better teams, and so I would have all these people that would started to just treat me like poorly because they didn't like that I was having all of this success and that they weren't. So like, these are some of the struggles that I had to go through personally on my journey to get really good at that point. But again, going back to the initial idea here, I remember always having that belief that so long as I just keep putting in the work, I am going to be, a top level player. So it's really important to have that belief, because if you don't, that you're going to be missing an edge that other people are going to have. And so the other thing again is back up that belief with the actions that actually are congruent with being a championship winning player. You're doing the work, you're taking yourself seriously. And one thing I can tell you is that if you find creative ways to channel that energy, that like kind of like fighting energy into other things, that can be really powerful. One of the ways that I did it as a younger player was through like fitness and I mean, sports wasn't as accessible to me for where I was geographically, but I ended up, for example, I was like really shit at running. So I decided I would get really good at running because I was bad at it, and I had a great area to run in. And that ended up being really powerful for me because I ended up getting quite good at running, but it was extremely challenging. I would only do it in a challenging way, like doing it for times and speeds and sprints and all sorts of stuff that was very difficult. And I did it and I kept pushing myself. I kept pushing myself constantly, and I kept channeling that sort of like fighting energy, that warrior kind of energy. And one thing that's really important is that obviously exercise, like I talked about previously, it's an edge. It's one of the many edges that you could get that's on the table for you if you decided you wanted to get it. The reason is because it improves the quality of your sleep. It improves the quality of your mood. It improves your energy. It improves your focus. It also, and maybe most importantly, depending on what it is, with running especially, is it really helps to train that willpower muscle that you've got. Because running ultimately is just a battle against the pain of running. Honestly, that's what it is. Especially if you get to a point where you're really tired and you just have to keep going. And I had an area that I would run in that was filled with a lot of inclines. Like it was very steep inclines, very hilly. And so I was constantly using these as a way to kind of train my willpower by like forcing myself up these hills at speed if I could. And so this is another edge that I found as a younger player where I used this to remind myself of that feeling. Because when you're overcoming stuff like this, hey, that's pretty difficult to do. It's not like everything in your body is saying give up, but you're giving yourself an example in that or at least I was giving myself an example in that moment that I'm not going to give up on this very difficult thing that I'm doing right now. And so again, like if we're trying to be, place ourselves and kind of nurture this feeling of being a champion, you should be experiencing that in that situation with the run, for example, which is what I was doing. Like I was feeling my fighting nature there, my warrior nature is what I was feeling there, because it's this battle of willpower, which is what you'll experience in the game as well. And if you put yourself in these environments, this is why people This is one of the reasons why people do stuff like the cold plunge, actually, is because the cold plunge sends your body into like a heightened stress response, a fight or flight response. And you're trying to condition your body to, once it gets really stressed like that, that you can switch it into a relaxed state so that you go into the rest and digest state instead. So you kind of swap it over because it thinks that it's in a lot of trouble. And so, it has that physiological response, and then you train it through that very uncomfortable experience to be okay. So you're getting more kind of experience in an uncomfortable dysphoric activity. You're getting the experience to say, I'm going to do something I really don't want to do, my body doesn't want to do, it's painful, I'm going to do it anyway, and I'm going to like take control of it, and I'm going to relax myself in it. So again, you're finding more ways to kind of be channeling that sort of fighting energy, in a sense, where you are able to kind of be the master of yourself, as opposed to, and then through that, achieve what you're trying to achieve, as opposed to allowing this environment otherwise to dictate what you're doing. So just a reminder, if you're leaving any edges on the table, don't do it. Make sure that you actually believe that you have everything that it takes to be a champion. So long as you take the correct actions, it will be an inevitability. So it's really just on you. Are you taking the correct actions, or are you not?